that getting the Soviets to agree to that was a poison pill that they took that helped bring about the end of the Cold War and the demise of this evil empire. Acknowledging that men and women, no matter where they are, no matter what government they are under, have certain universal rights. And so I have to go back to the Declaration because that's where we got it from. All men are created equal and endowed by the Creator by certain inalienable rights. We sometimes forget the sentence that comes after that or the phrase that comes after that. Governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. And that could set me off on a discussion of affirmative action and other things, as well as what happened after the Helsinki Final Act. But the role of government is to secure the universal rights of men and women. The Declaration and the Constitution, which I consider just absolutely marvelous, profound documents, they didn't apply to people who were black. And that's the truth. In fact, the Constitution was used as a means of suppressing blacks. In the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court said that a human being can be property if they're black, and only if they're black. You can't be property if you're white. If you're black, you can be property and returned to an owner. And that was done by the Supreme Court as a matter of constitutional law, based it on the Constitution. Plessy versus Ferguson in the 1890s, 1893, I guess, or 1896, I think, essentially said that separate is equal. And the separation is on the basis of color, solely color. And that therefore, as long as you treat equally, then you can separate them. But the whole reason to separate them was to treat unequally. And it essentially validated Jim Crow, segregation, disenfranchisement of an entire group of people who were black, giving them no economic opportunity, don't educate them, continue to treat them as 10th class citizens, and it rested on a decision of the Supreme Court of the United States, which was founded on the Constitution. And that continued up to my lifetime. So in 1963, when I came home from Vietnam, having served my nation, having sworn an oath to the Constitution to serve my nation, I came home and was denied access to restaurants and refused service in hotels and motels that if my skin was white or if I could shine it up a little more than it is and put a hat on my head so my hair isn't showing, as long as I could prove I wasn't black, then I was free to enjoy these benefits. The fact that I was a soldier of the nation was irrelevant. And this all rested on the Constitution, according to the courts, and according to some 30-odd presidents, and according to some 180 Congresses. And so this is an ancient history to me. This is my lifetime, my generation. And I choose not to forget that we have this history. But no one loves the Declaration or the Constitution more than me. But you have to see it in its correct perspective. And because it was so misused over those years, and it took us 200 years to get into the spirit that was intended by the Founding Fathers, even though they knew they couldn't do it in practice at that time, even though it took us 200 years, we can't ignore the legacy of that history that is still contaminating the present. And I think tools such as affirmative action are useful to help us rub out, sand down this inequity that continues to haunt the present that came from the past. So some say we don't wallow around in old history. Why not? We wallow around in the beauty of the Constitution and the Declaration. That's our old history. Well, then let's wallow around in all of it. What it did to black people for all those years. And therefore, I think it is appropriate to use tools such as affirmative action and other similar tools. I consider all of these to be transitional tools and temporary tools, but they're still necessary. If anyone says, well, they're not necessary, well, then let's go visit some inner cities and look at 100% segregated schools in 1998. And they're segregated by race and class and race are all mixed up. And we've got to get every one of these children educated into a college. Those who are able to go to college and want to go to college and can qualify for college. This isn't for people who are not qualified. But give them an extra added advantage to get into universities, get them into the middle class, and break that cycle in that family for that child forever. And that's what will speed things up. I was told the same thing in 1963 and 4. We didn't need a civil rights law. What's wrong? Personal property. They want to serve blacks in a restaurant, a public highway. So what? So what? Put some shoe polish in your face, see how you think about it. So, wonderful country. It's unthinkable for me to be chairman when I came in the Army 40 years ago this month, next month. It would have been unthinkable for anyone to say, well, he's going to be chairman. Come on. But it happened. And so what'll happen in one more generation? Maybe we'll get rid of all of these residual problems. But we're not going to get rid of them by just ignoring them or saying, no, gee, just do better. Or it's your fault. We have to do better, and to some extent we have to make sure our children don't ignore what their forefathers did to get us to this point. So excellence and performance and high standards are important, but I think it's also appropriate to use tools such as affirmative action to make sure all doors are open. It was more disappointing than terrifying. Fort Benning is a large Army installation in Georgia, in Columbus, Georgia. And in those days, the 50s and well into the early 60s, until the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 was passed and the Voting Rights Act of 65, it was in the heart of the segregated South. And so on base, it was wonderful. You could go anywhere, live anywhere, do anything you wish to do. But as soon as you went over the hill and down into Columbus, Georgia, it was a totally segregated existence. And the story I've told many times is coming home from Vietnam in 1963, having been away for an entire year, and in the process having had my wife having had a son while I was away, and I was busy trying to get a home ready for my family in the area. I couldn't get on base yet. The housing wasn't available. So I found a place in Phoenix City, Alabama, which also was not a great place to live as a black in those days. And one night after working on the house, I tried to buy a hamburger at a drive-in place in Columbus. I knew I couldn't go in. I didn't try to go in. I just tried to order it on the little speaker box for it to be brought out. And the young lady came out to take my order, the way it was done in those days, and she looked in the car and she asked me if I was Puerto Rican, and I said no. And then she asked me if I was an African student studying at the infantry school. I said, no, I'm not an African student studying at the infantry school. I'm an American. And she said, I'm terribly sorry, but I can't bring it out to the car. You'll have to get out and go around to the back. And I said, thank you very much, no thanks, and I drove off. That wasn't terrifying. It was just deeply, deeply hurtful and disappointing. If anything, it encouraged me, motivated me, caused me to find ways to demonstrate to people who held such beliefs that their beliefs had to be incorrect, had to be a lie. There's a great story from the Civil War where a Confederate general is writing to the Confederate government in Richmond. And it has to do with the issue of allowing blacks to serve in the Confederate Army or conscripting them for the Confederate Army. And this Confederate general writes to Jefferson Davis, and he says, don't let this happen. Whatever you do, don't let this happen. Because if blacks can wear a uniform with brass buttons and a belt with a brass buckle, and if they can go and serve and lay down their lives, they are the equal to us. And if that is the case, the whole theory of the Confederacy is a lie. So whatever you do, don't let black men serve. And the history of the black experience in the United States military for 300 years is a repetition of that. Black men were always willing to serve, as were black women, in the hope that their service as equals, willing to lay down their lives and fight for what the country believed in, would transfer over into civilian life. They were disappointed for most of our history, but with each conflict, things got a little bit better until we finally reached the period where a black man or black woman can rise to the top. And so the answer to your question is yes, it motivated me to fight back and to prove that if I'm your equal
in performance, then segregation has to be a lie.
When I got orders to Vietnam in the summer of 1962, I was excited and very happy. I'd been selected by my government to go to a combat zone and to serve a purpose that was noble. And we were fighting communism, and we were going to try to help the South Vietnamese protect themselves from communism and defend their way of life, let them make their own choices to how they should be governed. And so it was a very noble undertaking, and it was wrapped in the mystique of the Kennedy era.